Her mom called me a failure at Thanksgiving dinner. I defended my career. She snapped, "Don't talk back to my mother or get out." I nodded. I didn't argue. But when she returned to our empty apartment 3 days later, she finally learned I took get out literally. I never thought a holiday dinner could feel like walking on a tightrope over a pit of snakes. My hands were shaking, not from the cold, but from knowing that every word I said tonight could tip the scales into disaster. My name is Alex, I'm 32, and I've spent the last 5 years building a life I thought we were both proud of. But pride, I would soon realize, isn't always shared. Original post: I'm male, 32, and I've been with Sarah for almost 3 years. We met at a mutual friend's party, and I thought I'd found someone who understood the grind, the late nights, the ambition. She was smart, witty, beautiful in a quiet way. But beauty is slippery. It can hide contempt. And I'd see that tonight, crystal clear. We arrived at her family's place under a sky bruised purple and gray, the kind of November evening that smells faintly of wet leaves and cigarette smoke. Her apartment smelled like cinnamon candles, a forced kind of coziness that masked tension. Her mom, Barbara, greeted us with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I sensed the cold as soon as we walked through the door. "Alex," she said, her voice syrupy but sharp at the edges. "So you're still, what do you call it, working for that startup?" There was a pause, a pregnant silence, as if she expected me to shrink into my chair. "Yes, ma'am. It's been growing steadily," I replied, trying to sound calm, confident. Her lips tightened, her eyes flicking towards Sarah like she'd just shared a secret joke. "Growing? Slowly. Isn't that right?" she added, turning the knife ever so slightly. I felt it in my chest, that flicker of heat, the one that tells you not to back down. I had spent 10 years of my life chasing every promotion, every opportunity, and here she was, reducing it to nothing with a single word: slowly. Sarah laughed nervously, a tight, brittle sound, and I realized I was seeing a side of her I'd only glimpsed before, her need to appease her mother at all costs. "Mom, he's actually done really well. He's—" She trailed off, clearly unsure how far to defend me. Barbara's gaze snapped to Sarah, a predator's eye. "Don't talk back to me," she said, her tone sharp, final, like the crack of a whip. "Or get out." I froze for a fraction of a second. My mind was racing, parsing the words, weighing them. "Don't talk back or get out." The threat was obvious. But Sarah's hand reached for mine across the table, squeezing gently, and I knew she expected me to fold. I nodded. I didn't argue. Not tonight. Not in front of her. But inside, my blood was boiling. The dinner passed in a blur of tension-soaked courses: turkey, cranberry sauce, stuffing, all flavors dulled by the acidic taste of judgment. Every comment Barbara made was loaded, every smile a warning. I noticed the way Sarah kept glancing at me, as if willing me to shrink, to swallow my pride, to disappear, but I couldn't. I wouldn't. As dessert was cleared, the storm finally broke. Sarah's mom leaned back in her chair, hands folded, and said, "Alex, I just don't see how someone with such questionable career choices can ever provide a stable life." Her eyes darted to Sarah, triumphant. Something inside me snapped, not rage, not fear, but clarity. "I work hard," I said, voice steady but firm. "I've sacrificed a lot, built something I'm proud of, and I'm not here to justify that to anyone." Barbara's eyebrows shot up, and Sarah's hand left mine, her face a mask of shock. "Alex," Sarah whispered sharply, don't talk back to my mother." "I'm not talking back," I said, calm, deliberate. "I'm defending myself." The air thickened. You could feel the tension like static electricity, making the hairs on your neck rise. Sarah stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "Either you stop or you leave," she said, every word clipped, every syllable a blade. I froze again. Then slowly I nodded. I didn't argue. Not now, I didn't need to. There's power in silence, in letting the threat hang in the air like smoke from a candle. We left shortly after, the ride home silent except for the low hum of the engine and the occasional rustle of leaves scraping against the windshield. Sarah kept staring out the window, a tight line of tension across her lips. and I stared straight ahead, plotting my next move. Not out of spite, out of self-preservation. At our apartment, I made no immediate move to unpack or settle back into routine. I sat at the kitchen table, hands folded, staring at the dim glow of the pendant light. My mind replayed every word, every glance, every subtle insult. This wasn't just about dinner. It was about control, dominance, the silent power plays she and her mother orchestrated with surgical precision. And I had decided I would not be a pawn. I started going through old messages, casual texts Sarah had sent during the week. They were normal at first, sweet, everyday talk. But then I noticed patterns, little slips, hints that she had been increasingly distant, distracted, sometimes defensive about her phone. My stomach twisted. I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling. Something was off. That night I lay awake, the ceiling fan casting shadows like slow-moving predators on the walls. I thought about our first year together, how easy it had been, how genuine our laughs had felt. And now, this. This was a different kind of weight, heavier, cold, impossible to ignore. The next morning I went about my usual routine, coffee, emails, planning the week, but my mind was elsewhere, circling back to the conversation, to her words, to the threat. Get out, she had said. Three simple words that sounded casual, almost dismissive, but layered with menace. By noon I had made a decision. I didn't want to escalate, didn't want to argue, but I also couldn't ignore it. This was no longer just a fight over pride. It was about boundaries, respect, and the kind of life I was willing or unwilling to live. I spent the afternoon packing a few essentials, not out of anger, but preparedness. Clothes, laptop, a few personal items. Everything else could wait. I left a simple note on the kitchen counter, nothing accusatory, just factual. I've taken some space. Call me when you're ready to talk. I knew she would read it. I knew it would sting. 3 days passed. 3 days of silence. Calls went unanswered. Texts unread. Social media checked compulsively, only to see no updates, no hints, no signs. The apartment felt larger, emptier, quieter than ever, and I realized how much of our life together had been layered over tension I hadn't fully acknowledged. I wasn't waiting for drama. Not really. I was waiting for truth. 3 days later, Sarah finally returned. I heard the familiar click of the apartment door before she even reached the hallway, and my stomach tightened. There was a pause, a breath that seemed to stretch for an eternity. Then the door swung open, and she stepped inside, eyes immediately scanning the room. The apartment was empty. Not a trace of our shared life remained. The couch was bare, the kitchen counters cleared, the bed stripped down to sheets. She froze mid-step, as if the air itself had shifted. Alex? Her voice was sharp, uncertain. Fear, confusion, and a hint of anger tangled together in the tone. I stood in the living room, hands in my pockets, watching her. Calm, controlled. The silence between us was deafening, punctuated only by the soft hum of the air conditioner. You're gone, she said finally, her words almost a whisper. Her eyes darted around the empty apartment, panic beginning to flare. I took your words literally, I replied evenly, my voice carrying just enough steel to make her shiver. Get out! Her face went pale. She opened her mouth, then closed it. She was trying to recover, to manipulate, to argue, but the script she thought she controlled had flipped. You can't just, she began, but I cut her off. I can, and I did. 3 days ago. I just waited for you to come back and realize that boundaries aren't suggestions. Her phone buzzed on the counter. She grabbed it, her fingers trembling. Messages from her friends, frantic. Is everything okay? Where's Alex? Calls missed, texts unanswered, social media exploding with speculation. The echo of her social network's confusion amplified her panic. Sarah, I said softly, almost mockingly, do you want to explain the messages I found on your phone before dinner? Or should I? She froze. That one line broke her composure completely. The walls of control she had built crumbled like sand. I don't know what you're talking about, she stammered, voice cracking. I stepped closer, calm, precise, my every movement deliberate. Don't lie to me. I know about him. The texts, the calls, the late-night meetings you had to work. Her eyes widened, a flash of guilt and fear crossing her features. Alex, I... No, not tonight, I interrupted. Tonight you learn that threats have consequences. She sank onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. The apartment, once our shared space, felt like a courtroom, and she was on trial. My phone buzzed with a text from my closest friend. Are you okay? Did she finally back off? I didn't answer. This was personal, legal, emotional, all at once. I reached for the laptop I had packed days ago. Messages, screenshots, timestamps. I projected everything onto the TV. Every deceit, every lie, every carefully hidden betrayal displayed in stark clarity. Her gasp filled the apartment like glass shattering. Alex, I... It's not what you think, she pleaded, but the words were hollow, desperate. It's exactly what I think, I said, and now you're going to deal with the fallout. The next hours were a storm. Calls to her friends, to mutual acquaintances, to the police, because her manipulation and threats had crossed a line. Officers came to take statements, and her world, the carefully curated illusion she had built, started to unravel. Every lie she had hidden in plain sight now faced scrutiny. Text from the other man appeared on the screen, his confusion and anger at being suddenly cut off from her. Friends sent screenshots from social media, gossip threads, everything amplifying the consequences she had thought she could dodge. Through it all, I remained composed, controlled. I wasn't angry in the usual way. This wasn't about revenge, it was about exposure, accountability, and reclaiming the power she tried to wrest from me. Her mother called next. Barbara's tone was icy over the phone. Alex, this is outrageous. You can't just... I can, I said calmly, my voice steady. 3 days ago, I left. Your daughter threatened me with, get out, and I took it literally. It's that simple. There was silence. Then a click as the call ended. Sarah sat in stunned disbelief, realizing for the first time that her threats, her control, her entire approach to dominance had backfired spectacularly. She had expected me to bend, to crumble, to apologize. Instead, I had held the line. You waited, she said finally, voice trembling. Yes, I replied, and now you understand that words have weight. Actions have consequences. Hours later, when the police had filed reports and our friends had reached out, some sympathetic, some shocked, Sarah sent a flurry of texts, apologies, attempts at reconciliation. I read them, deleted them, and made no reply. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a lesson learned the hard way. In the days that followed, her social circle buzzed with the fallout. Friends whispered, messages circulated, the reality of her choices landing on her like a storm. She faced not only the personal consequences of her deceit, but the social exposure, the unmasking of a carefully constructed image. Every attempt at manipulation, every sly comment at dinner, every subtle dismissal was now laid bare. And through it all, I remained silent, patient, controlled, watching, observing, letting the truth speak louder than any argument or threat ever could. When she finally confronted me again, weeks later, it was different. No threats, no bluster, just fear, regret, and the realization that I had not only walked away, but had done so without malice, only clarity. Alex, she said quietly, sitting across from me at a neutral cafe, her hands wrapped around a mug of coffee. I understand now. Do you? I asked, calm but pointed. Yes, she admitted, voice barely above a whisper. I treated you unfairly. I threatened you. I tried to manipulate you. And now? I pressed gently. And now, she said, meeting my eyes, I see that words matter, and actions speak louder. I nodded, letting the weight of the moment settle. This wasn't about winning or losing. It was about boundaries, respect, and understanding. She had learned the lesson I tried to teach for 3 days straight. I don't respond to threats with fear. I respond with clarity, with precision, with the calm understanding that some lines are non-negotiable. As I left the cafe, I felt the weight lift. Not vindictive satisfaction, but a quiet, firm knowledge that I had preserved my dignity, my life, and my future. She had to confront the truth herself, the hard, unvarnished truth, and there was no turning back. Weeks later, friends told me stories of how the news had spread, her family struggling to process the shift, mutual friends taking sides, gossip threads dissecting every detail. Social media commentary, once trivial, now mirrored real consequences. I never posted about it. I didn't need to. The truth had a louder voice than any post, any comment, any attempt at narrative control she could orchestrate. The lesson I realized was simple yet profound. Threats only have power if you allow them to. Boundaries are not optional, and sometimes the most powerful response is not argument, not retaliation, but deliberate action, calm, precise, and unflinching. Sarah eventually stopped calling. The messages ceased. Her attempts at reconciliation faded into silence. And in that silence, I found clarity. My life, my space, my peace were intact. The threat had been neutralized not by confrontation, but by refusal to engage on the terms she set. I looked around my apartment one evening, everything in its place, calm restored. The lesson lingered like the faint smell of cinnamon from that long-ago Thanksgiving, a reminder of what had transpired and how it could have gone differently had I reacted impulsively. Sometimes the quietest, most measured responses carry the greatest impact. And when she finally understood that I had taken her words literally acted on the only command she had given, she could no longer manipulate, no longer threaten, and no longer hide behind the illusion of control. I had not just survived the storm, I had emerged stronger, unbroken, and fully aware of the lines I would never allow anyone to cross again. The echoes of that night, of those 3 days, still ripple in my memory. And every time I hear someone casually dismiss or threaten, I remember the power of calm, the impact of deliberate action, and the importance of holding firm. Because some words are promises, some threats are choices, and sometimes taking them literally is the only way to ensure they never control you again.